Reading Shakespeare, listening to Mozart, or looking at the works of Michelangelo, I could see what genuine genius really is. As I continued to mature, becoming a psychiatrist and a neuroscientist, I also wondered how their brains could produce such magnificent and original achievements. Although Mozart was trained to be a prodigy, so many other great geniuses came from nowhere. How? Why? I also wondered how many geniuses had been born, had been given the creative nature, but were unable to realize their gifts for lack of nurture. Half of the human beings in history are women, for example, but we have had so few women recognized for their genius. How many were held back by societal influences, similar to the ones I encountered and dared to ignore? I cannot believe that women are innately less creative than men. But the problem goes beyond gender. It includes racism, prejudice, poverty, wars, lack of education, and a host of other forces that prevent the seeds of creativity from sprouting. We cannot afford to waste human gifts. We need to learn how to nurture the creative nature. Therefore, I have chosen to dedicate this book to all those lost geniuses of the past, in the hope that it will help more thrive in the future. I wish to thank those who helped make this book possible. My administrative assistant, Luann Godlove, worked patiently and faithfully on the preparation of the manuscript. Jane Nevins of the Dana Press was an invaluable critic and supporter, full of helpful suggestions, as she cheered me on to the finish line. And my husband, Terry Gwynn, was always at my side, providing encouragement and support, as best buddies should. Chapter 1. The Nature of Creativity, the Ingenious Human Brain. To see a world in a grain of sand and a heaven in a wildflower, hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour. William Blake, Auguries of Innocence. Human beings similar to you and me have lived on our earth for approximately 100,000 years. If we include the humans who preceded modern man, known these days as Homo sapiens sapiens, such as Neanderthal man, or Homo erectus, or even Homo sapiens, we have been present even longer. I often wonder what these early people felt, and what their lives were like. These cavemen seem far removed from us, partly because they are so often portrayed as slumped and naked and hairy, or wearing rudimentary clothing and carrying clubs. But they are our ancestors, and not all that far removed. And they may have had much more soul and spirit and creativity than the stereotyped images in books and museums lead us to believe. When did these early people begin to think and feel in the ways that we do in the 21st century? When did male and female human beings begin to feel dedicated and faithful love for one another and to mate for life, as many so-called lower animals do? When did they begin to mourn the loss of their mate, if he or she died? When did they begin to love their children as we love ours? How did they feel about growing old? How did they begin to understand their own mortality? When did they begin to bury their dead, and why? When did they begin to wonder about supernatural forces greater than themselves, to develop a sense of spirituality, and to worship gods, or a god? When did they begin to map the motions of the stars and planets in the skies, and pass this information on to others? When did they begin to tell stories while watching an open fire, to celebrate together with communal feasts, and to create alcoholic beverages to add to the conviviality? When did they begin to wear clothing, and why? As we move mentally back in time, we can ask almost endless questions about what our early ancestors might have been like, and how and when their inner spirits began to resemble our own. Because we have no written records, we have no answers to these questions. The earliest written records come relatively late in the history of humankind. Cuneiform script and hieroglyphics, the earliest forms of writing, are only about 5,000 years old, much more recent than the emergence of modern man.